So without further ado, we'll kick things off for real. So I'm Ross, CEO and co-founder of Accord, and I'll be hopefully playing more of a facilitator here, because we definitely want the questions from the folks, 20 plus folks joining in right now, to have a better discussion. Although we have a couple awesome sales leaders to share their thoughts here. So we're going to be talking about mutual action plans and different ways to drive deal velocity, win rates through making it easier for buyers to buy. At least I believe that's the number one lever that you have as a sales leader or seller to drive velocity, win rates, all of the good things that you want, and make it easier for buyers to buy. And honestly, have a way better time doing it, instead of being this pushy, kind of bad rep that sometimes salespeople get. So we're gonna dive into it. The first question, just getting some overall thoughts on why maps, what are they, why are they so crucial to selling, especially these days when you see more stakeholders involved in deals, tighter budgets, needing a much more clear path forward for people to really use their social capital to potentially buy something while rifts are going on and budgets are being slashed. So yeah, maybe we'll go in reverse order here. Todd, if you want to kick things off. When I read your book first, I was like, holy smokes, this is the whole concept behind mutual plans and guiding buyers and all this stuff. So I'm curious to get your take on why this is so important.
Yeah, and to your point about now too, it's become more important. Clearly, I can't help but think. I had a friend of mine that went to Mount Everest to go go climb it, at least to base camp, I guess they call it. And I was picturing that, the Sherpa, imagine the Sherpa standing there. He walks up and the Sherpa's like, hey, you guys know what you want to accomplish. Why you're here. You've trained for this. Which way do you want to go? Right? The Sherpa, if the Sherpa said that, that individual would be like, we're all going to die. Right? I think about our role as sales professionals. I say this a lot, but we don't buy when we're convinced. We buy, if we do, we're probably pissed about it 20 minutes later. We buy when we can predict, right? We are prediction machines. We need to know the bad and the good. We need expectations to be set properly. And that's your role as a salesperson, is to set proper expectations, because there's something called reward bias. It's a bias I made up, but it's this idea that we actually bias our perception of a reward by the journey to get to it, right? We will not always take the biggest ROI. We will take, hey, what's something that we can accomplish of my list of 100 things that I can get done and get the reward, whatever that outcome is, personally and professionally, and then move on. If we can set that expectation up front.
Yeah.
When you mentioned now versus even 3-4 years ago, you're right. Consensus selling is hard, of course. Consensus buying, harder. These people have never bought what you're selling before. If they have, maybe once a year, they don't have a whole organization behind them. But the now is, a lot of these buyers are remote too. So building consensus on their side just got a lot harder. And so, for them, they don't run into people in the parking lot or getting coffee in the break area, because a lot of them are remote. So it's up to you to make sure that you're taking care of that reward bias, to set expectations, set the plan ahead of time, because you are the Sherpa, not them. You know more about how they should buy, not you. And as long as you take that perception that, hey, I'm here to help you set expectations. And if this journey is going to be too hard, let's talk about it now versus 3 months from now after we just circled the drain. So my perspective is that be a shepherd of the deal and a server to your customer. You're not there to convince them.
Totally. And I think that is kind of the core to what I've seen that differentiates maybe that top 10%, 20% of sellers. And you typically have 1 or 2 of those on every team, from everyone else, is really that mindset. It's not about the tactics. It's not about their ability to, convince or be an amazing talker and smooth talker and all that kind of stuff that people think, or be charismatic. It is just that mental framework of, I'm here on the other side to help you potentially solve this problem through the solution that I represent. That's it. And taking the pressure off themselves. It's really counterintuitive. I don't know yet. I'm still figuring out how to coach people towards this. But I totally agree, Todd. And Brooke, I'm curious to get your take on this as well.
I love the way you put it, Todd, that they're like Sherpas, and we are. And I mean, I need to like think about that more for reps and maybe get them some Sherpa outfits for some of it. But that is what it is. And when I think about mutual action plans or mutual success plans, is we happen to call them that at my company, but they go by a few different terms. I think there are two main reasons that are buyer centric that make them important. The first is what Todd just walked through, and I really couldn't state it better. It's just you're guiding your prospect and you're making their job easier and more efficient, where purchasing is very heavy and very difficult, and they're often making multiple purchases at one time. So always going through more than one evaluation other than yours. I think the second buyer-centric reason that having a plan is so important is for the outcomes and the value that we're creating post-sale, which is why they came to us in the first place. It wasn't just to get to the signature, it was what they're going to get out of making the purchase. And so that mutual action plan really is the roadmap for the customer's onboarding into the product, whatever it is that you sell or your service, and then the path to the positive outcomes that they were looking for when they came to you in the first place. And then I think the last piece that I always talk about with our team, the trickle down, is how helpful it is to us as sales leaders and to the sales team, because when we're doing the right thing for our buyers and our customers, there's always this good outcome for us, and that's better deal control. And when I think about how much B2B sales has evolved, especially over the past 5 to 10 years, but especially accelerated in the past, 3, COVID probably really kicked it off. And then it never went back. We have 7 to 10 stakeholders in a typical buying committee, which was traditionally the way the enterprise sales was, but now it doesn't really matter what segment you sell into, it's going to look like that. The buying processes within those companies are changing so fast too. We're seeing, sometimes a company will have 2 changes to their internal buying process within the same calendar year. And what that does is it creates all this uncertainty for the people who are in charge of the evaluation, because the last time they went through a purchase, it was relatively easy. It was quick. There were 3 steps. 2 or 3 new steps have been put into place since the last time they bought, and they're finding that out as they go. And so, the more that we can help them through that and help them anticipate what they're going to run into, we get faster sales cycles, we get better close rates, and a happier buyer along the way. So I think, that's the trickle down that we see to the rep, manager, VP level is, that type of a win. So.
Totally. And I think you nailed something that, again, like you said, is unique to the last 2 or 3 years. And Todd, you mentioned this as well, is the stakeholders, not just the number, but the complexity of the different personas. And for every new person that needs to be involved, it isn't, 1 + 1 = 2. It's exponentially more challenging, because that is work that you're not just, people think it's like, oh, just budget sign off, forward them the proposal or put something together. They have a different mental model than probably the other people you've been talking to. Let's say now a good example is this VP of finance persona that maybe hadn't been involved in some of these mid-market deals before, a sub 50, sub 100K deal. Now, potentially the CFO is looking at every plus, and I don't even say plus 10, like any deal possible that they're signing up for. It's a whole new way of thinking about the deal. When are they going to get looped in? How are you going to frame it? How are you going to get in front of them before they just see the proposal? All of these pieces, and that's one persona out of the multiple that are now involved. It is crucial to make sure that you're sharing with your buyer that this is likely going to happen. And Todd, you kind of mentioned this, and we're kind of figuring out the right way to word it internally, but we talk about this buyer fatigue, where if you don't set the right expectations up front and 1 or 2 or 3 things come up that weren't relayed and you weren't able to set the right expectation, that's when you get ghosted on real qualified opportunities, is when it becomes more work. It's so easy to say, I'll do this later. It feels kind of overwhelming. I didn't mentally prepare. And Todd, I forget the word that you use, kind of like the journey that you're going on and the reward. If it feels bigger than what you signed up for, you're just not going to probably do it.
Can I tell a story about that? So, some of you have heard me tell this story before, but like my wife and I, we got 2 kids who are 9 and 11. We were out shopping. It was like early afternoon. As we're thinking about going home. My wife leans over and she's like, hey, should we go get some ice cream? Right. She says it kind of quiet, but my kids have hawk earring for ice cream. Right. And they're like, ice cream? Let's go to Culver's. And so here in Chicago, Midwest, there's Culver's that have it's frozen custard, which is pretty fantastic. So we're excited. The kids are excited. We've got 4 of us that all dig it. We got the money in our pocket. We drive over, get there. The shop itself is closed up because of staffing issues. The drive-through line's got 14 cars in it. So we've got an expectation. We show up, we get there, and we're just like, crap. So, but we don't say anything because the kids want the Culvers. The reward's still right there at the window. But within 2 minutes, my daughter leans forward and she's like, hey, can we just go home? Really? And then my son's like, yeah, I just want to go play Minecraft. Like, let's get out of here. So we pulled out and, went home. We chose the status quo.
Yeah.
Now, if you're like the salesperson at Culver's sitting there going, what's wrong with those people? Like, they came here, they showed up and they just took off and didn't say anything. Well, that's your buyers because of that expectation, right? That the expectation was we'd go get it and be home with our, frozen custard. On the other hand, a couple of years ago, we went to Disneyland in the summer. The kid that we were going to go on the It's a Small World ride. We get to the line's only 45 minutes. And we're like, wow, it's only 45 minutes? That's cool. Like, I thought it was going to be an hour and a half. It's not about removing every piece of friction from the journey. It's about identifying the friction, setting that as an expectation, and allowing that customer to qualify out earlier. So you're spending your most valuable resource, which is your time, on the opportunities you should be winning. But number 2 is you're differentiating in the way that you sell because you are a trusted advisor and not there to jam them into a solution.
How about that?
Completely. And this is where I think it's harder for developing reps to grok that as a key piece of the deal, because there's so many other things to learn. And I think where we're focused on, at least in a lot of sales training and the things that I've been through, it's about the problem, qualifying and quantifying it. It's about sharing your solution and being this consultant, but that's not it. It's not about, like your examples, Todd. You have the problem, they want this thing. Product market fit is there. It's a qualified buyer. It's not about the solution either. You still have the thing ready. It's about the buying journey. It's literally the job of the seller to do that, set the right expectation. And that's where I think there's this huge gap in the way that, in this B2B sales world, people aren't thinking about this. They're not putting on the buyer's shoes and being like, how can we minimize that line? There's things that we can do that take 5 minutes off that are a few cars, hey, instead of it looks like 14, it looks like 3, because I'm going to take on the 11 cars worth of work.
Right. Exactly. I mean, you go to Chick-fil-A, right? I mean, the thing Brooke said, that everybody, like, it's the reason why maps fall down, in my opinion, is that sales leaders and revenue leaders make it a seller-centric thing. Like, this is a process we require. And the rep's like, what? I'm not going to tell these people how to buy. But Brooke said it's about being buyer-centric and not seller-centric. Like, once you think, like, wouldn't that be awesome to go to an electronics store and somebody is there, like I have to buy like a new refrigerator or something, and there's somebody there that's like, hey, here's the things to look out for. Here's the things you need. Here's the things you don't need. Like, wouldn't that endear you? Right? You've got to take that buyer perception and perspective on it, and that changes everything. Don't make it about because my boss told me to. The value from a buyer perspective is so valuable that it creates another differentiator for you.
Yes, totally. And Brooke, so I'd love to maybe get it really tactical here. What does that sound like? Let's pick, that ideal rep on your team, and they're getting on a call. It's a great opportunity. Maybe they purchased Drift in the past, or they've done a bunch of research and they're like, this is the thing we're going to do. We likely have budget. I'm the decision maker. It's a VP of marketing. What does that sound like on that, end of that first call or second call when your rep gets on and they're about to frame the journey of buying Drift?
Sure. I actually role play this all the time. So I love a good role play. Let's do it. And that does actually happen where, we have repeat buyers come back around at Drift where they were a customer at another company. They get a new job as a marketing director, a head of sales at another company, and they come back around. But now there's a buying group that is new to it. So we're always kind of restarting in some way. We do recommend to our reps that we have this conversation, if not at the end of the first call, then certainly by the end of the second. And there are some, reasons that we look for across, like, why do we do on the first versus the second? But, we come out to the end of the call and we would say, great. So it looks like at this point we are, going to continue an evaluation together, which is going to take some time. And I wanted to pull up this document that I have, and the rep will actually pull it up on the screen share, and live type into the document. I wish I had one I could pull up right here. But they start to fill out the steps that first we lay out. This is what we typically see needs to happen in our evaluations with companies like yours, your size, your type of company, your use case. These are the traditional steps we see, but there are often differences for other companies. So if we work on this together, we can start to lay the groundwork for what I'll need to pull in for resources for you, how I can help manage this so that I'm doing a lot of the heavy lifting for you and helping you anticipate so that we can get you to your ultimate goal of X, which is why I always go back to the outcomes. This isn't about it. It is about a signed contract, but for them, it's about getting to their business outcomes. So we're thinking all the way out to you signed, you're onboarding, you're set up, you're starting to execute, and now you're seeing those results come in, which is why you purchase. So typically that conversation is actually really comfortable. The prospect will look at the screen and they'll say like, oh, I didn't even think of that. This is getting the wheels turning. Okay. And like, they find it a relief almost that they don't have to do the mental work of starting to think that through without someone guiding them. Like we're a project manager in that way, and part guide. So that's how we do it. It's pretty simple. And then we coach the reps to bring that back up on every call as the deal evolves and things change, which they do in every sale. We're always making edits to that document and then recirculating it around to all the stakeholders, externally and internally, so that everyone stays on the same page.
Totally nailed it. Todd, any things that you would add to that if, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just one. I think it's, you know, I think that you've got to give also the out for the customer that, hey, listen, like if you've got journey shock, let's talk about it now, right? Like to try to minimize like, hey, these are the steps we typically see companies like yours and individuals like yours in your roles needing to follow to get this done. Here's a couple of wacky ones that came up recently with another client that made it like, my personality is kind of like throw a couple like joking ones in there. Like, you got to do something crazy along, but like we see these things, like let's align around that. But if this is more than you'd signed up for, I mean, we consistently see these steps with the companies that invest in Drift, right? And if this looks like it's too long of a journey, if you're transactional and we're talking something much more complex, let's address that now, right? Like I a lot of times I say it around pricing and sticker shock, right? The term sticker shock has never been associated with anything good in the history of humankind. And if you're talking about a 6-figure solution to a 4-figure buyer, you better find that out now versus 3 months from now, right? Set those expectations, but in the same way that Brooke just said it, lay out the journey, lay out, here's some things that we see that people aren't expecting, like let's be prepared for those. And if this is too much, let's address that now and part as friends. And a lot of times, again, you develop yourself as an advisor and a consultant and not there to go, we're going to follow this map and at the end you're signed. Like Brooke said, it's about the goal, the journey to the outcome, not the journey to that initial milestone, which is you signing a contract.
So I think I heard 3 or 4 things just to maybe pull out for folks that might not be as familiar with that ideal talk track. I think one of them that I heard, and Todd, you mentioned this as well, is this is what it typically looks like. So they're looking for the guide. Either they have bought it before, but not at this organization, or they haven't bought this type of solution before. They're sitting, I promise you, because now I'm a buyer in my role, promise you they're thinking, what is this going to take? And that's a question that I don't think many reps think about. They think about, they care about the product. They think about, they care about the price and all these other things. They want to know what it looks like. That's the top question they typically have. And you're totally missing it if you're not walking them through this process. So, hey, this is typically, if I understand what you're looking to do, this is the process. And before then, and this is actually, I would prioritize this over anything that you do, is this is why. And Brooke, you mentioned this at the beginning. You have to frame every conversation, any new part of a conversation in the sales process with, this is what I understand you're trying to get to. And that's why we're doing this, because you're building on that value. So all the work that you've done on that first call, second call, what you've heard, hey, it sounds like you're trying to accomplish this because of these reasons. We typically help companies do this. So this is what it typically looks like. And then adding another key part that I think a lot of people miss, which is, but this is just the average. Hopefully this has about 80, maybe 90% of what we're likely to do, but every company is unique. Everyone has, their quirky person in security or their own legal headaches and all this stuff. What is that for you? These are the people typically involved, but where's that going to happen here? Do you have a sense of that? So you have the why at the start, you have the expectation around what the roadmap looks like, that you're the expert, and you're asking them, hey, but for you, what is this going to look like? And then what Todd said, giving them the out. But also, hey, I know we're early on in the process. Are we in the same, world, universe right now for how you're thinking about this? And they're like, oh no, this is super helpful. This is exactly what I was looking for. Okay, now how do we do this stuff? Or, you know what? Maybe we're going to start something smaller. Maybe this is, I was honestly thinking that this was maybe a Q4 thing, but now I'm starting to think maybe this is one or two. Okay, cool. Then you're going to change your approach. It's more about education. Maybe you have to find another champion or stakeholder, something like that. So those are kind of the things that I heard that I think are really important to that initial conversation.
Yeah, and I think you're, just for everybody listening, I mean, your mindset has to be that you know more about how they're going to buy your solution than they do. Like, because a lot of times, like younger reps, a lot of times are like, how am I going to tell them how to do, like, you know what? You are the expert on how to buy your solution, and you're there to guide them. Now, every single situation is going to be unique, right? Every customer and prospect's going to have different twists and turns, but know that you're more of an expert on how they're going to buy this than they are. And if you can just get that in your mind and get comfortable with it, this whole thing becomes easier.
So Brooke, what does the opposite sound like? Or actually, maybe a better question, where is the blockage for certain reps, or I even see this with certain sales leaders, of why it doesn't work? Why, what is the thing that they're like, oh, I can't do this, or I don't want to, or what is that, kind of mental block that you see with certain teams?
Definitely seen it a lot. We work through it, but it takes a little bit of patience. And, most of the time it has to do with sort of a belief system around how much to push or when it's appropriate, or, how someone will feel about you. And I put in quotes, like putting the cart before the horse, because you'll hear that when you really dig in with a rep and you're like, what prevents you from doing this? Or what are some of your concerns? And instead of just telling them to do it, try to really have that conversation. You'll eventually uncover that, they feel like it's too soon and that they're pushing their prospective buyer too hard because we haven't gotten to yes yet. Well, like, we're probably not going to get to yes for a little bit of time here. Like, for us, our sales cycles are 60 to 65 days in our mid-market organization. So we may not get to a firm yes until we're all the way down the line, the purchasing process, while they're evaluating. So that doesn't mean that we're not going to start to guide them. And we try to work with the rep to kind of like unpack why they feel the way they do about putting the cart before the horse, and really get them thinking about how it is buyer centric. And it's good for the person that they're selling to start that sooner. I'll also hear a lot of things like, I'm not working with the person who has all those answers, which actually is like an interesting flag to be aware of about your deal, where you need to pull some other people in, but it also doesn't mean that we can't start, right? So you might start a mutual action plan or success plan and have a couple of gaps that I've got this goal of filling in these gaps as we go, as we pull additional stakeholders in, as I build more trust and credibility with my buyer, I'll be able to fill those in, but what you're missing. And so does your contact. I think that like the biggest reason, when I really think about it, that I've heard across the most reps and managers, especially managers that were recently a rep, right? Like they carry these beliefs over into their new role, is just around the appropriateness of having this conversation before they got a verbal that we're going to buy. So I'll pause there. That's pretty much what I see.
Yeah, I think that's something that I see as well. For me, it comes from a place of confidence. That's a lack of confidence of them having this type of conversation. I think actually it's bigger for first-time frontline managers than it is reps. Actually, I see, because they're afraid of putting their beliefs on their reps around this, even if they've done this themselves, and that's why they got promoted, because they were a top rep. They're afraid of having other people do this because maybe they feel that their reps don't have that confidence. So like, I'm not going to get you to do this thing. But yeah, Todd, what do you see around why people can't get over this hump of why they can't be the expert, why they can't be the Sherpa, why they can't earlier on in the conversation help buyers buy.
Well, you might be surprised to hear this, but I have a totally wacky analogy.
Love the stories.
Yeah. So like for everybody, like go watch a reality makeover TV show, right? Whether it's like Restaurant Impossible, Bar Rescue, Queer Eye on Netflix, they do this really well. Like when they share the map, because what happens is each one of their engagements, they're establish their credibility first. Like Brooke said, you've got to establish the credibility up front. Otherwise, it's not like, hey, we're awesome. This is how great we are. And here's the map. The customer's gonna be like, what? Like, take it easy. On all those shows, what do? They start by aligning, like, hey, you're investing time in me. I'm here to help you. Why? Like, let's align around what you see your own issues to be. They do a little disarming, and then they go through a diagnosis. You know, the show hosts will do like, hey, have you thought about this? Companies like yours, we've seen this and this as an issue. Are those issues for you? All right, cool. So now you've established that credibility as an expert and an advisor. And then you go, all right, well, one of the other things that we see with other clients is you've probably never bought a solution like this. Here's some of the things that we see companies in the journey that companies like yours often need to take to be able to get to that outcome that you're looking for. Can we go through that? I'd love to share just an example and some of those ideas that we see from other clients like yours. And like, let's figure out whether or not this is even a journey you want to take first. And then second, mutually, let's align around what steps you think are going to be required. And I'm here to guide you and point out the potholes before you come to them. That's the way that they do it on reality makeover TV shows that not only tell a great story, they become really compelling to the individual that's participating in it. And at the end, they're all crying and friends forever about the great result that they've ended up with. And they're friends. And like, that's what you want. Go watch a couple of reality makeover TV shows. It'll change your perspective around how you engage. Like there's no we slideshow at the beginning of those shows. That would be the most boring show in the history of the planet of here's my mission statement and here's a map of all of our offices and our products and a NASCAR. Like that would suck. What do? They exude their credibility through being smart and helping that buyer get to an outcome and maybe helping them see potential outcomes they didn't know were possible and then sharing the map.
Yeah, one thing that stands out there that I think kind of ties back to, I think, why some reps have this mental block around guiding buyers this way and being that Sherpa, is this idea of selling at versus selling with. And I think most people learn and think about sales as I'm pitching something, sell me this pen. I have to do such a good job on this demo that I got certified with. And they're not getting certified, or you're not thinking about it in how do I sit on their side of the table and become that expert, have that lens of, I know this singular problem that we mainly help sell, this 1, 2, 3 thing. I'm going to know this better than any possible person I can talk to because that's all we do. And that should be available for the rep to give them that confidence to sit on the side of the table and say, hey, like you said, Todd, this is what we help companies with. Hopefully that's why we're talking, because if not, we're probably not gonna be able to help you. But these are the 2 or 3 things we help VPs of sales build a more collaborative sales process to increase deal win rates and deal velocity. If that's not what you're working on, we are not the right person. I can, hey, you're looking on this other thing, top of funnel, cool. I'll send you 2 or 3 examples of things that can help with that. But like, that's not the world that we're living in. This is what we can help people with and sit on their side of the table and build that relationship and become a champion together. And that's, I think, how people talk about sales. The average salesperson talks about sales of I'm selling them versus I'm helping them do this thing. So yeah. Awesome. Well, I know we only got about 5 or 10 minutes left and we've flown through some of these questions. I have a lot to think about as well from some of these answers. From Brooke
I do, if it'll help. I've got one other side benefit that maybe will help people quite a bit that maybe you're not thinking about. And I see it every day. The fake expiring discount, right? Where you, like this shirt I bought from Banana Republic. Every Monday, Banana Republic offers, like you get an email that says, today only 30% off. And you're like, oh, all right, cool. And then dinner time comes around and like 7 hours left. This deal goes away forever. And you're like, okay, cool. Well, you know what? I didn't buy it. And so Tuesday morning you wake up and it's gone. Like, oh crap, all right. But next weekend, it's friends and family discount weekend. It's 40% off. And you're like, oh, you're right. It did go away, but it got better because I waited, right? The fake expiring discount, stop it, first of all. Because there's nobody who's ever bought anything in the history of humankind knows or thinks that that really is going away. So that doesn't help you. It actually slows down buyers because they know the closer they get to that date, they can ask for more. The mutual action plan is so valuable in this. Imagine you've got a mutual action plan in place. You know what the steps are because you've mutually aligned around them. The customer at the goal line is just like, Brooke, I got to get 10% off of this thing, or I got to get 5% off of this thing to get it done. A lot of times the reps are like, get it done by the end of November, and you get like, whatever. That's BS, and we know it. What you could do is this. You say, hey, listen, there's tremendous value to us and our organization on our ability to predict, right? Like, who knew, you know, me and Brooke here, we got quotas, right? Like, that's no surprise. But from an organizational perspective, for resourcing, we do forecasts to our investors, so much value. If you are willing to mutually, big word, align around the timing of when you think this will get that done, like this map says we're going to get it done around the first week of November, but there'll probably be a hiccup or two in there. If you think you can get this done by the end of November, there's so much value to us, we'll pay you in the form of a discount to hold to it. So now you've explained the why, you've aligned around timing, and that individual's got skin in the game around it instead of it just being the fake expiring discount they know they're going to get afterwards. You've explained the why so that as that time comes, they're now incented because they actually put skin in the game in around the timing, and they understand that you're paying for something. You're not just paying for a random discount, you're paying for predictability. And as a result, you'd be shocked how much your customers align around that.
Yeah. I always talk about it with the managers and the reps, like discounts help and they do solve some problems, but they don't drive anything without the business level urgency that we're always coming back to, which again, I'll come back to it one more time. This is not just about the steps that it takes to get to the signed contract, but the go live date and the outcomes that they're looking for in the go live. So if we're always bringing the prospect back around to that and what we're actually trying to accomplish by, let's say, January 15th, because you're headed into your busy season, that's when you want to be set up and seeing results from your purchase. We've backstepped into this order of events that has to happen to get us to that outcome. And then a discount on top of that helps to create the urgency, if you're going to use it, to have your champion be able to go to legal and ask to prioritize this contract over the 40 others that they have to look at, right? Like things like that, but it doesn't really work without the business level urgency in the mutual plan.
Yeah, the mutual.
Why on their side as well? Yeah, right. It's like, hey, this is for me, but hey, I heard that this is what we're trying to do.
Yep.
And you know, yeah, at least I understand that we're through these things and it's October 20th and we have 2 things to do, but it sounds like it's gonna be really hard with legal. Would this help prioritize the final infosec in this if we were to trade waiting 2 more weeks to get the same outcome versus this? Because yeah, to be transparent, it's really helpful for us because we're closing out the quarter, closing out the month, and it seems like an easy way for us to save time because people don't think about that. From the sales organization's perspective, that extra 10 days of that rep being able to focus on sourcing or another deal or something, it is a huge win-win. It doesn't devalue the product. And I hate when people say never discount.
Right. Well, you got to trade. Right.
It's a lever, especially for mid-market or enterprise deals. It's an amazing, amazing lever to have if done right.
Exactly.
And also the difference between 5% and 10% and 20% absolutely doesn't matter if you're a customer. So always pick, at least start with a lower number. I see that a lot as well, as like coming out. And then you're like, wait, you were about to charge me 30% more, 20% more for this thing. And now you don't have to, like that feels really shitty on the other side.
Exactly.
So make sure that counterintuitively, the discount's smaller, you're adding more value to the deal as well.
Exactly. I mean, it's got to be mutual, right? Like the word mutual is so important and explained, right? The fact that there is value in our ability to predict, because otherwise there's no why, right? If it's only about like, hey, I know you're trying to hit these goals, so we'll give you 5% to get it signed by then. Buyers see through that. But if you're like, hey, and I can predict, like part of my job is to forecast, it's always got to be when you're paying in the form of a discount, that discount can't be in the form of charity to the customer's bottom line.
Yeah.
It's got to be like, what am I getting in return too? Like we as an organization are willing to pay for 4 things: buy more stuff, pay faster, commit longer, help us forecast. That's it, right? Throw those 4 on a piece of paper and go, here's the things that we'll pay you for. And that timing, unless it's mutual, it'll go right out the window.
Totally. Well, as we wrap up, we have a great question from James here. Single biggest piece of advice you'd share with someone getting ramped as an AE, something that's been transformative, either for you or for your reps. And yeah, tie it back to kind of some of the stuff that we've been learning. I guess I can start actually doing this the first time. I will never forget the first time that I sat a CFO down with the timeline and the business case that I'd built and shared my screen. We're on a Google Sheet. And he said, this is BS. I don't believe this part of the business case. This thing isn't going to happen. This one, I believe in half of this. And just, again, sitting at the same side of the table, having a very real conversation, doing the work before and asking for that validation instead of saying, this is our proposal, this is the ROI, completely changed how I approach sales, and led to me to being one of the top reps for 16 quarters in a row. So that to me was like a hugely transformative experience. Do the work first, ask for validation. I know, probably overly simple, but that's what I'm thinking about.
Ross, that's a nice run. What'd you say? 16 quarters in a row? Okay. I think if I had to think of the biggest piece of advice I give to a new rep getting started as it pertains to this would be like, know your buyer's world really well. Because the better you, and this works so well just for like running great sales in general. It's not just related to a mutual action plan, but the better you understand what it's like to be in the shoes of your buyer, the industry that they're in, the type of company that they're at, what their role is like, the more of an advisor you can be. And the key to all of this working and feeling really natural and good for your buyer is that like, it comes from a place of advisory that you really want to help and you understand what their challenges are. And that you can't fake that. You either know or you don't. You either care to uncover it and understand it as you're getting started, or you skip it. So what's yours, Todd?
Well, I haven't nerded out on history at all yet, so it's time, I think. So here, the phrase buyers know more nowadays, right? Like you see that everywhere, those 4 words, buyers know more nowadays. Would it surprise you to hear that those 4 words were in Thomas Herbert Russell's 1912 book, Salesmanship? 110 years ago, the sales world was concerned about the proliferation of advertising, marketing, and cataloging as being a threat to the role. The profession thrived, right? Fast forward to just 7 years ago. So 2015, Forrester, in their annual State of Sales report, issued a proclamation that by 2020, 1 million B2B sales jobs would go away, and hundreds of thousands of college students wouldn't graduate into the sales profession because buyers know more nowadays and they don't need us, and because of the proliferation of e-commerce. What happened? The opposite happened. The perspective for all of you, and the thing that really was kind of an eye-opener for me, is this idea that more information available to a buyer hasn't made it easier for them. It's made it harder. And that's why the profession has continued to grow, is the reps that see exactly like Brooke said, that, hey, know your customers. Because there is a quote from a 1911 book by a guy named Arthur Sheldon in his book called The Art of Selling, saying that sales is the science, or is true salesmanship is a science, right? Like it's the, I'm sorry, I'm going to do that one more time because I like that phrase.
Or we're going to edit this after and it's going to sound really perfect.
It's true salesmanship is the science of service. Grasp that thought firmly and never let go, right? Like I love that quote. You as a sales professional, it's the science of service. Grab that firmly, never let go. And it's those people like Ross that has 16 quarters in a row where he's killing it. It's because he saw that lens. Sales is not about plaid coats and gold chains, right? Again, it goes back to this idea. We don't buy when we're convinced. We buy when we can predict. And your role is to be the science of service to those individuals and not there to convince them to do anything.
Love that. Thank you for the history lesson, Todd. And I love it. Another quote that comes to mind is sense making. With so much information out there, the best sellers are sense makers for their clients. There's way too much information out there. How do you simplify it? I know we're a minute over. This was an amazing discussion. I have a lot to think about after hearing Brooke and Todd, your thoughts on this. Hopefully everyone out there that's either listening live or probably the vast majority after your calls, listening to the recording, found this helpful. We will share some links in the blog post that we're going to write up. Hopefully Todd and Brooke are open to some people hitting them up, asking for some advice here, because this was really great. And yeah, appreciate everyone taking their valuable time to hear some sales tips and tricks.
Yeah, anytime. It was fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, reach out. Would love to be a resource for all of you, and really appreciate you all having me on, and Adrienne for summarizing that quote for me that I jumbled.
Awesome. Brooke,
It was
Todd,
good
everyone,
build-up.
have a
All
great
right.
one.
Have a great one. See you.
Bye.
See you guys.